When did overprotective parenting completely backfire? My stepmom had this insane rule about locking every single door in our house at exactly 6 p.m. And I mean every single door. The front door, back door, even the door to the garage. She would lock everything with deadbolts she'd installed herself that could only be opened from the inside with her personal set of keys. You see, I was 17 and a straight A student, not some wild child, but she was absolutely convinced I'd sneak out the moment her back was turned to. In her own words, run around with boys and get pregnant. The irony was, I didn't even have a boyfriend. I spent most nights doing homework or watching Netflix, but try explaining that to someone who thought every teenage girl was one unlocked door away from ruining her life. Even simple things became impossible. Like when my friend Emma wanted to drop off my calculus notes at 7 p.m., I had to tell her to leave them on the porch because my stepmom wouldn't open the door, accusing me of orchestrating an elaborate escape plan. Even when my dad would come home late from work, he would have to stand outside for 20 minutes, calling and texting while my stepmom took her sweet time coming downstairs with her keys, making sure to lecture him about being home before lockdown. I begged him constantly to talk sense into her, to remove at least some of the locks, but he'd just shrug helplessly and say, "You know how she is about safety, honey. She means well." Then one evening, Dad pulled me aside to talk. He looked around nervously, making sure my stepmom was upstairs, then pressed something small and cold into my palm. To my absolute surprise, it was a spare key to the front door. "This is only for real emergencies," he whispered, his eyes darting toward the stairs. "I mean it, Sophie. Life or death situations only. She can never know about this." I wanted to scream at him, to demand he should actually stand up to his wife instead of sneaking around like we were co-conspirators, but the exhaustion in his eyes stopped me. "Why can't you just tell her she's being ridiculous?" I pleaded one more time, but he just shook his head. "She had a bad childhood, Sophie. Someone broke into her house when she was young. This makes her feel safe." I wanted to point out that her trauma was now becoming my prison, but I just nodded and tucked the key into an old jewelry box in my room, buried under tangled necklaces I never wore. 3 weeks later, on a Tuesday night around 7 p.m., I heard someone tumbling down the stairs while I was in my room. Then I heard my stepmom scream like she'd just seen the devil. I raced to the top of the stairs, but when I looked down, I was horrified. Her left leg was bent at an angle that made my stomach churn, and red was pooling from a gash on her forehead where she'd hit the wall. "Sophie, help me," she gasped, her face white with pain, trying to drag herself toward the door with her arms. I flew down the stairs, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the door handle, yanking and pulling at the deadbolt that wouldn't budge. "Where are your keys?" I screamed, scanning the floor around her, praying they'd fallen from her pocket. "Upstairs," she moaned. "My bedroom, dresser." I started to run back up, then froze. Her bedroom door had an electronic lock that only opened with her thumbprint. "Your door is locked. You need to tell me the override code." She was getting paler, her breathing more labored. I never set one. "Sophie, please." The blood was spreading, her consciousness fading in and out. I pounded on the door, screaming for help I knew wouldn't come. The neighbors were too far to hear. Dad wouldn't be home for hours, and every exit was sealed tight by her own paranoid system. Then, like a lightning bolt, I remembered the key. I sprinted to my room, throwing jewelry everywhere until my fingers closed around that piece of metal, racing back down, my hands trembling so violently it took 3 tries to get it in the lock. The door finally swung open, and I half-dragged, half-carried her to my car, her blood staining my clothes as she drifted in and out of consciousness, whispering, "I'm sorry," over and over. The doctor said if I'd been even 10 minutes later, my stepmom might have lost her leg entirely from the compound fracture and blood loss. The next day, Dad hired a locksmith to remove every single deadbolt while my stepmom watched from her wheelchair.